And we are live today for the great Google Ads debate. Welcome. If you're here live today or watching this replay later on YouTube, we are so excited for you to join us here today. I'm Jyll, I'm here with Amalia, and we are going to be talking all things Google Ads. But before we dive into it, a quick introduction for those who might not know us. Amalia, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Jyll. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled that we're doing this. This was a Twitter idea that became reality. My name is Amalia Fowler. I am a search marketer. I've been working in Google Ads for the past 8 years in agency. Now I also own my own consultancy, primarily focused on auditing and developing digital strategy. And I teach new baby marketers in college as well, all about search marketing and Google Ads. And I'm thrilled to have this debate with Jyll because I feel like we sit on opposite sides of some ideas in the industry, but as you can tell, still get along swimmingly, which I think is an excellent example for everyone else.
Exactly. Thank you for that. And I'm Jyll. For those that don't know me, I worked at Google for 6 years as part of the Google Ads sales organization and left just over a year ago and started my own business. So actually quite similarly to Amalia, I teach digital marketing to entrepreneurs and business owners and to beginner marketers. I do coaching. I do Google Ads audits as well. So we have a lot in common there, and that we both really love to help people learn all about Google Ads and learn that there's more than one way to approach a problem in our complicated industry. So before we get straight into the debate, what we really want to share with you is that the purpose of this debate today is not to say that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It's not black or white. It's many shades of gray. We work in a complicated industry, an industry where things are always changing. We can only anticipate what might be in store for us at Google Marketing Live soon. So today we really want to show how there are lots of different ways to approach a problem, and also how it's possible to disagree without being disagreeable. Anything you'd like to add to that, Amalia? Oh, I'm not sure if I'm frozen or if Amalia is frozen. Let's see. Can't go live these days without having some technical difficulties, can we? I know that Amalia was having internet trouble earlier today, and so was I as well. So we'll pause for a moment to see if we can fix these issues here. But for those who are watching us live now, in the meantime, if you have any questions or anything that you would like to ask us, then please let us know. Thank you, Rob, for letting us know that Amalia is frozen. We'll give her a few moments to come back online because I know we are both going to want to share our strong opinions about broad match keywords. And yes, as Sarah points out, at least she is also frozen with a smile, which also helps. So while Amalia is sorting out her technical issue, oh, there she goes back into the studio. I'm going to bring her back into the stream. Welcome back, Amalia.
I was literally telling Jyll just before this, Mercury's in retrograde. I'm having a week. I was hot spotting, so that didn't happen. And then it happened.
You'll be happy to know that you froze in a flattering, smiling position.
Amazing, because that is a talent, I think, these days. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. Oh, no.
But if it does, we'll just roll with it, because that's what we do. Roll with the changes in internet like we roll with the changes in the Google Ads platform.
We do. And I was answering your question. I was then just talking to myself, but I was saying that I think what a really important point that we tend to forget, and even I forget sometimes, is that there is no black and white, right and wrong, binary, like yes, no, in our industry. And a lot of the time for clickbait or for tweets or whatever, we'll position these thoughts like it's the only way to do it. And there are best practices. And I would argue there are some ways to do things wrong. There are definitely like wrong things we could probably both agree on. But for the most part, I think we need to stop fighting over the little things as an industry as a whole and like focus on, okay, what's best for this client or this person or this, in this time. So that's what I was going to say before I
Glad you got to say it for us now. So let's dive right into it. And for those watching live, if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, let us know in the chat. If you're watching this replay later, you can leave a comment on this video, or if Twitter is your preferred medium, use the hashtag Google Ads debate. Amalia and I will not be live tweeting while debating right now, but we would love to join in the conversation with you on Twitter later with the hashtag Google Ads debate. So let's get into it. First topic for today, broad match keywords. Are they good? Are they bad to use? Not to use? Would you like me to go first, Amalia, and then we'll shoot it over to your view?
I do.
Absolutely. So for those who have used Google Ads would know, broad match keywords is when you as an advertiser put a keyword into your account as is. And when you do that without any quotations or brackets or anything around it, that tells Google, I want to advertise on this keyword, but also other things that are related to this keyword. So if your keyword is water glass, broad match could match that to water cup, soda glass, and on and on and on. And within the Google Ads interface, Google Ads will always recommend that you upgrade to broad match or use broad match to match on more search terms from users. So my opinion on broad match keywords is that it depends, but for the most part, I do like to test broad match keywords when I'm working with a budget in a search campaign of at least like $50 a day. That means I'm not in super limited budget mode. We have some room to learn, and it can be a really great way to start a campaign just to learn what's available and what's out there and what people are searching. When I go audit a Google Ads account, if I see broad match keywords, I will always go check the search term report and see, is it doing the right thing? And when it's with automated bidding focused on conversions, it often can do the right thing, or is it pulling in a lot of irrelevant stuff and decide from there? So I'm not going to say everyone should use broad match keywords. I'm not going to say they're always bad. I actually prefer to test dynamic ad groups rather than broad match keywords, because then at least we're using the website as a bit of a filter. But I will not say that broad match is always bad. Probably the most egregious broad match mistake I've seen is an advertiser who had a toy shop, and all the broad match search terms coming in were for Blippi and Cocomelon. And for those who have kids, you know that those are popular kids' YouTube channels and not at all the same intent as toys. So that to me is bad broad match. But then I've seen it for other clients just work amazingly well and drive scale. So that's what I think about broad match. What do you think, Amalia? What's your advice about broad match?
So when it comes to broad match, I will use it almost never. I wish I had gone through my accounts to tell you exactly how many of them have broad match before we were talking. I can think of two, and both of them have massive budgets. They've been around for a long time, and they have very, very robust negative keyword lists. My issue with broad match is that term related that you brought up, that it's like it's related to the term. I have seen some matches that like a 5-year-old would not place that term with the keyword, that it's like a young child new to the English language would not be like, these things are related to each other. And while I appreciate that Google's algorithm is trying to learn, and that it is, I would say it is getting better. It's not the same terrible quality matches that it was a year ago. So I will credit that. I think that it's difficult as somebody, as you know, we're accountable to our clients, to ask somebody to have a whole bunch of broad match keywords in their account that might match with something good. But if they don't match with something good, we're now spending, possibly some money, definitely a lot of impressions on things that don't make sense. I also would love for Google, I work with a lot of small service-based businesses in specific, and I would love for Google to have a way for me to tell them, like, I don't want to match to competitors. I never want plumbing services to be like Daniel's Plumbing. Like, that's never, like, hypothetically related, but not good for my business. So my issue with broad match is that it matches to a lot of things I don't actually think are related. There seems to be no real control for advertisers to give feedback, and it ends up wasting my clients' money. But I will say, like, I'm not 100% on the other side. I do use it under very specific circumstances.
So then let me ask you this. What match type do you prefer to use? I know it depends, but generally, are you more of a phrase match or an exact match fan?
I'd say it's pretty evenly split, actually. I don't sit in a camp. I start with phrase match, but even then, and that's not like a hard and fast rule, I do have a lot of phrase match, but I'm watching the spend, I'm watching the matches, and there's been times where I have to move that to exact just to get what I need for the client. But again, most of my clients have small budgets. Most of my clients I do have some that are in the $40,000 to $100,000 a month range. So that's not small, obviously, but the majority of them are in the like $2,000 to $3,000 a month range. And so it is a lot harder because it without the volume, it's harder for everything to learn. So I do appreciate that.
It's that vicious cycle. And I'm with you. For someone spending a couple $1,000s on Google ads, which to that business owner is huge, but in the scheme of Google ads is tiny, I wouldn't recommend broad match either. My favorite's usually phrase. I figure it's that like Goldilocks solution when starting out, and we can learn from there. And actually see Julie here is in the chat telling us that this is actually a big topic on PPC chat this week. So you can catch up on those tweets on Twitter under hashtag PPC chat. So I feel like we can't talk about broad match keywords and matching of intent without talking about the giant elephant that plopped in our laps this year with Performance Max. So tell us, Amalia, Performance Max, for or against? How are you feeling about it right now?
Against. For a couple of reasons. And I will say, like, I feel like it's very important to be upfront that I have never run one because I am so against it. So I feel like the need to be like, I'm very biased in so far that I've never even tried it. But there's reasons why. And three in particular, and I was like thinking about these in the car this morning while I was driving back home. The first is the lack of data that I get, data transparency. I'm accountable to clients for sometimes a lot of their money or what feels like a lot of their money. And if I can't tell them where it's going or why or all of that, like it's a lot harder for me to do my job. I also think it's weird that you pay for something and don't get access to that data in general, to be completely honest. The second thing is brand safety. I can't have the multiple networks. Like, I don't think we have display placements on here, but if we did, we could probably go for days about how I just think those placements are not very very good for any brand that I've worked with. So not being able to see that, the multiple networks, the automated like lack of visibility, and like it is a running joke in my life that I like control, like not just with Google ads. So I appreciate that I have my own limitations here, but I can't justify spending my clients' money on testing something in a lot of cases because they have smaller budgets. And I certainly can't justify spending it on something that I personally like don't believe will work and can't see how the data is going to, like how everything works out on the other side. Now, I know that we disagree on this because you run them and you give them time to learn. And like, I feel like if they could choose a person to hang out with, they would choose you. So I want to hear your
Performance Max, besties over here. Yeah. But actually not. I have like a very frenemy relationship with Performance Max now. And it's one of those things, and I think this applies to a lot of automated campaign types. In theory, it's amazing. In practice, it doesn't work as well because things like conversion tracking isn't perfect or the website isn't perfect or whatever it might be. So I was really gung-ho, tested it with my clients, and then in my coaching practice, helping people set them up and run them and analyzing ones that have been running. And right now, today, in May 2022, I definitely recommend them for e-commerce businesses that are very performance-focused, conversion-focused, and don't share your brand safety concerns. I'm more hesitant to recommend them for lead gen businesses. And that's because it's very rare to find a lead gen business, especially in a smaller budget level or a medium-sized budget level that has perfect integration of their offline conversions. If all Performance Max needs to do is drive leads and that's a conversion, it's going to go find the cheapest leads it can. And those are likely not going to be quality leads. Now, in my opinion, that's not Google's fault. That's the business owner's fault, but like a reason for that business owner to not use Performance Max. Whereas on the e-commerce side, if the conversion action is a purchase, we know like that person actually purchased, that's real money in the bank. That's a real ROAS or a real CPA going on there. And in that instance, I think it's a great solution. The lack of transparency doesn't bother me so much. It actually has gotten a bit better since it launched earlier this year. There's like a kind of search terms report. It shows you search term themes. It shows you audience themes. There's some cheat ways in Google Analytics to see what landing page it's going to. So I like automation. It works if it has the right data. And the challenge is so many small businesses aren't able to give it the right data. Therefore, it doesn't work and isn't the right solution.
I would also say that most small businesses don't know they need to give the right data, and that I really think Google misses an education opportunity. And I know we'll get to learning Google ads as like part of what we're talking about.
Let's get there now. Let's go right into that now.
Amazing. Their Skillshop certifications do not lend themselves to actually teaching a small business owner, like, you need conversions, and here's why. And here's why. Your point about e-com and the value is honestly not something I had thought of when it came to Performance Max, because I don't really work in e-com. So I'm a lead gen person. I'm not going to have, and actually I was sitting here being like, thanks for validating my assumptions, Jyll, with your testing.
You got it.
This is why we need to share information as an industry too, because
Yes.
we all work in different circumstances. But I do think that, like, yes, I agree that the business owner is responsible for being able to vet quality and put all that together. The average business owner I know, not just small businesses, we're talking like businesses with 100+ employees, don't know that, or they don't know how to figure it out. And so I feel like there's just, Google's education has really shifted from being about the business owner, which is where it was, I would argue, when I started 8 years ago. Like, there were programs and people to help, put these points together, to now where it's like, it feels like to me, let's focus on the biggest advertisers and, just tell the small ones that they should upgrade, in quotes, to broad match. And can you tell that I am not a fan of that approach?
I can tell. I do think so. I'm not familiar with what it was like 8 years ago. I lived very much my Google bubble until just over a year ago. But it really shocked me, being someone who worked at Google and worked with the multi-million-dollar clients at Google to outside. I was really shocked by how different the perception was and how many people feel like you do, Amalia. That surprised me, because I was used to being surrounded by people who, obviously, Google's great and education's great, and I still think it is, but it's really hard to serve and educate advertisers at scale. And so I think Skillshop does a great job of setting the foundation for understanding, like, that there is an auction and how the auction works and what quality is and these type of things. And I think that's so important, because many business owners try to open Google Ads right away, dive right in, and have no idea what they're doing. What Skillshop doesn't do as good a job as, and, like, honestly, the reason I even have a business doing coaching, is the practical, the so what. Like, okay, let's say that I do now understand ad rank and bidding and what a conversion is. What do I do with it? And that, I think, is where the gap is. And I don't know if there is necessarily a better way for Google to play in that space, because, as you and I are even showing here, it really depends on so many factors and it changes so quickly. So in terms of learning Google Ads, I do recommend to people to start with Skillshop. Even for my own Google Ads course, I tell people, like, don't buy my course, go to Skillshop and then come to my course to learn how to put it into action. But it is really tricky to fill that gap, not just on the in-platform stuff, but to your point, like, conversion tracking, and what does that mean? And can I track a phone call? And how do I import offline conversions? It's intimidating and really hard to learn.
I can really, first of all, I feel the need to disclaim, like, I have a love-hate relationship with Google. I obviously owe Google my entire career. So I sit here and I say they could do so many things better. But I think one of the reasons I want them to do better is because I see so much from where I stand of even just small tweaks, because I appreciate your argument about being able to educate at scale. I mean, I educate students on how to do Google, and it's hard. If you don't have a business, if you don't have money, teaching the theory behind it all without someone spending, $1,000 to find out how it actually works, it is hard. I will credit that point to both you and Google. But I'm not asking for massive changes in terms of how they change things. Like, for example, when you go set up a Google account for the first time, it would be so great if they were like, hey, have you taken this course first? Have you learned about this first? Or as they set up, if they're picking a bidding strategy, it would actually warn them that if they didn't have conversion set up, this is not a good decision to make. My favorite is when they combine search and display network in the setup box, and you unclick display and it says, most advertisers use this setting. Yeah, because most of them don't know any better. You're not saying most advertisers do better with this setting. You're just saying most people don't know to unclick that box. But the average person doesn't know how to switch to expert mode, doesn't understand. Like, Google, I don't think Google understands, or maybe it does, how powerful of a household name it is, to the point where, like, businesses blindly trust whatever is said. And it's only after they work in Google Ads for a while or work with an expert for a while where they're like, oh, Google's also a business looking to make money. And I don't fault Google for being a business looking to make money, but I do think that some of their educational pieces are very swayed towards them and don't provide enough context for the average business owner. And it makes me frustrated.
It's an interesting take, and I can definitely see that. Like, I agree with you. I personally don't like that when you start Google Ads, it throws you into the smart campaign. You don't even know it's a smart campaign or that expert mode exists. But I can also empathize with the product managers who made that decision, because probably people weren't even getting a campaign live at all if you're thrown into expert mode and it's like, what the heck is this? You know, what am I supposed to do? I think, and you know, not working at Google, I can say this, like, Google Ads is actually not a great fit for some businesses. And that's the hard truth as well, that obviously Google can take that stance. But it just happened to me yesterday. Someone booked a coaching call with me. They wanted to get Google Ads live. And within the first 5 minutes, I looked at their conversion metrics in the website and I said, don't run ads. They won't be profitable. And we spent the whole time talking about something else instead. And like, that's not a position for Google to take. Like, if you're in Google Ads, they're trying to get you there and get your campaign live as quickly as possible and get your ads out there as much as possible to give the machine enough data so it can try to learn and do all this for you. But it's also something that I say on TikTok and elsewhere, like, not every business needs to run. Your business has to be ready to support, whether it's Google Ads or Facebook ads or anything else. It's not like, oh, the ads didn't work for my business. Like, that's totally possible, but also maybe your business wasn't ready for ads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. All I'm asking for is that when a new person opens the account, that there's one box that says smart mode, inexperienced and want help setting whatever here, and then one box that says, would you like more options and control over your account? Click expert mode. Like, why is expert mode, Jyll, why is it at the very bottom of the page when nobody can see it? Like, I can't find it half the time and I'm supposed to be the expert. Anyways, I promise that's
I agree with you.
That button, but it drives
I agree with you on that one. And actually, you have to set up a whole smart campaign and then set it live and pause it, and then switch to expert mode, and then confirm, yes, I want to switch to expert mode, and then switch view. There's like one more step. So I am with you there. We have Kirk saying to us in the chat, nice to see you, Kirk, that if Google is aware of a certain business size or vertical not working well for PPC, it would be ethical to just say that or increase trust overall with brands. In my opinion, I don't know if it's Google's place to say that. You know, you mentioned earlier, Amalia, that like Google is a business and like is there to make money. And sometimes we forget about that. But like, what other business do we expect that we go to them and try to use it? And they're like, actually, let me just check first if I think you're qualified to use my product. Like, you can imagine how that can go over poorly.
You just did that with your client though. And I know I do it with my clients all the time, where they come to me and they go, I want to work with you. And I go, you're not ready, or this isn't the right fit for you, or I'm not the right fit for you. I send work to other people all the time because in my mind, it would be unethical for me to take it on. Granted, I'm one person, and obviously with a company of thousands of employees, how do you filter the same way? But I can appreciate Kirk's point based off of your point, which is where if there are, like, maybe it's a checklist, it's like, do you have analytics on your site? Do you have, you know, someone who can help you? Like, do you have a dedicated landing page? I don't know. That's a whole other debate. I don't think you always need a dedicated landing page. But I feel like there is a world. I tell my students all the time, you have to have value being created for your business and for the customer. And sometimes I think Google steps way too far in their own value category, or is really just focused on those enterprise level customers. And again, if that's what they want to do, totally fine. I just, from an ethical, like, business owner perspective, like, I've helped people pay their rent, you know, off of running Google Ads campaigns, or hire their first employee, or quit their day job. And I think Google Ads really, or not Google Ads, but Google as a whole sometimes forgets about the little person. And that's their prerogative if they want to, because it probably, like you said, wouldn't be scalable and doesn't make them a lot of money to remember the little people. And then we wouldn't have work either.
I will say, though, as someone who worked at Google for 6 years and is totally drunk on Kool-Aid, I will fully admit that. There are hundreds, if not thousands of people at Google who work on trying to make Google's products better for small business owners. And if they were here talking to you, which they wouldn't be, they would probably be very saddened, to hear you say that. And so for me, I'm like, I can see how now, being outside of Google, I can see how it appears to small business owners like Google doesn't care, or Google's only focused on the biggest advertisers or whatever. I genuinely don't think that's the intent behind Google's programs. And I think it's really easy for us on the outside to be like, oh, well, Google should do this and Google should do that. But like what you mentioned, Amalia, let's say the Google ads did open up with this simple, are you a beginner? Do you need help? Like Google could genuinely lose billions of dollars by doing that. Like one little thing. Just like we see in a Google ads account that checking one box or tweaking one thing can make the difference in profitability or not. Tiny things to us seem like that's so easy. Like that is actually a ginormous, like potentially stock moving change. And so I'm not saying it can be done, but it's a lot more complicated than it may sound.
I think that's fair. And I think when we were prepping for this debate, we were talking about trust.
Yes.
In Google and I think that's really where a lot of these like Google reps, which we haven't talked about yet, learning Google ads, the like little notes in the account. I feel like it really does boil down to trust. And I've said this to Google, like I had a call with them a couple of years ago and they were just like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust Google? I was like, I don't know what to tell you. But I think I can appreciate there are probably people internally who are working to make it better for small business owners, and at the scale that they operate, it probably is really difficult to make a single change. And to us, on this side, it is hard though, because I just want the language to be clearer. Mm-hmm. Like, don't call it an upgrade to broad batch. Just be like, your campaign is likely to have less volume. That's true. It is likely to have less volume. You can say that, but don't call it an upgrade.
I'm with you there. I do not think it should be called an upgrade to broad match. I understand why search partners and display network are included by default on search campaigns, but like I always uncheck display and I usually uncheck search partners. And I think that's a place where you and I definitely agree.
It is. Larry said Google reps not calling at 1 a.m. would be nice. We haven't talked about Google reps. Jyll, would you like to start?
Sure.
You're a big advocate of working with them.
I was not a Google rep in the traditional sense. I worked as part of the Google Ad sales organization. Within that, there's like the large customer sales and the everything else. So I was in the large customer sales. And then within that, I was not a dedicated account manager or account executive. I was on a specialist team. So like the matrix of Google, and this applies on the smaller side as well, is you'll have your what people outside say, my Google rep. But inside it's an account manager or an account strategist or a campaign manager, account executive, who has anywhere from one business they manage to 100 businesses they manage. I should say advise, not manage. And then there's this other whole layer of specialists, video specialists, app specialists, offline conversion tracking specialists, on and on. And my specialty was international growth. So my job was to help large Canadian advertisers expand outside of Canada through Google Ads and Google's Insights. And my team was cross-channel, so I also had interaction with some of the smaller clients. So it's been very interesting for me going from being on the inside, having access to the tools and data and richness that we have to support clients, to them being on the outside. And now like I have Google reps. And I sometimes say I'm either their most favorite or least favorite client. So I'd be like, can you just go to this internal tool and type in that and uncheck that box and send it to me? And they're like, sometimes like, sure, yeah, no problem. Sometimes like, I'm so sorry. I've only been here a few months. I don't know what you're talking about. But I will say on the part that most people interact with Google, which is the part where your Google rep has anywhere from 10 to like 100 or even more clients to meet with, I think there's a big misunderstanding whether that person is a support rep or a sales rep. And what I've also seen on PPC Chat Twitter recently is a misunderstanding of if that person is a sales rep, are they managing your account? Are they supporting your account? Are they advising? And what's the role there? I think it gets really messy. And so like, if I could make a suggestion to Google about that, like I think there's an opportunity to do some better expectation setting around like, who are these Googlers or Google contractors? What are they there to do? What are they not there to do? Because as an outsider now, I experience a lot of what I believe is misunderstanding rather than bad intent. I don't know. What do you think, Amalia?
I think that that's a fair point about misunderstanding. I mean, so like you mentioned, you were in Google drinking the Kool-Aid. I was in industry, like baby marketer myself 8 years ago, and my Google rep was super helpful. And I think a big part of the misunderstanding has been that shift of the internal program to what it used to be to what it is now, with no discussion about like how that shift has happened. And we just see Larry here said that the reps say in their emails that they are the account manager, which can confuse brands a lot. And I do think that it boils down to the individual reps. Like I've had some amazing individual reps. Rick from Texas, we loved you. I have like been invited to pizza in Rhode Island with my reps back in the day. Some of my favorite tricks in the account now I learned from a Google rep. So I don't like have this blanket. I have to be careful to not have this blanket like all Google reps are bad. But I will say that the quality has shifted, and a lot of them don't seem to present themselves accurately to what you're kind of saying. Like, are you a support person? Are you here to manage? Are you here to sell? Are you here to advise, which I would argue could include upselling? I mean, we've talked about this. Service reps often upsell, but I don't think they're transparent about how they do it or when they do it, or, and a lot of them, quite honestly, so there is this, and I don't think you can confirm or deny, I wouldn't expect you to, there's this myth that they have quotas. And so a lot of the time when they're advising and we say, no, that's not good for the client, they come back and go, you need to do it anyways. And that's where my issue is, because if they're doing that to me, somebody who can explain the interface often better than they can, and explain why I'm not doing something, and their answer is you need to do it anyways. What are they saying to the smaller businesses who don't have a me to probably not always the most smoothly defend the account?
Yeah, no, I agree. That is not a googly response at all. I actually don't know if I can confirm or deny. So to be safe, I will do neither. But what I do feel comfortable saying is like there are definite incentives in place and definite priorities that may shift quarter to quarter for various sales teams. Like I know back in April, everyone received an email from their Google rep about auto apply recommendations. That wasn't because those individual people all woke up that morning and said, I feel like I should pitch auto apply recommendations to everyone. What I will say though, and this is just personal observation, I obviously, but I'll make in no way speaking on behalf of Google or anything Google like that. But my observation is that in the last couple of years, there's been more of an effort to increase diversity in hiring. And not just diversity the way you may think about it, like race or gender or things like that, but also diversity of experiences. And so especially in certain parts of the Google Ads organization, rather than just always trying to hire internally or always trying to hire someone coming from an agency or who already has Google Ads experience, trying to hire people who may not have Google Ads experience, but have other, whether it's sales experience or great communication skills or good business acumen or whatever it may be. Again, that is just a personal observation. And so I think a knock-on effect of that is that there's more people potentially coming into Google, having a job as your Google rep who actually have not run Google Ads for themselves or their own business. And so the training they get is the straight up Google training, which as we talked about has some benefits and some drawbacks as well. So it's really interesting. I would think that if I were talking to someone from Google right now, they would probably agree, hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that, that there's always an opportunity to continuously improve the training that what we call Google reps, but as Larry mentioned, account managers, account executives, account strategists received. And over the years that I was there, at least, I observed that the training I received started to focus a little less on in Google Ads, push these buttons, and a little more on like asking clients questions, understanding their business objectives, and then how do we match the Google Ads products and solutions to their business objectives. So I did observe that shift happening. And I would hope that that shift is observed in the market as well, but maybe it isn't quite yet.
So I think we can agree, or I think we do agree on the like importance of clarity. I think nobody would say that they should be calling at 1 a.m. I don't think anyone's arguing that point. I think what I've observed from like your Twitter threads is that you're always give them a chance. Your team give them a chance, get on the phone with them. And my time is too valuable to waste on this conversation, which is probably unfair to the individual. It is unfair. I'll say it's unfair to the individual Google rep, but because of the shifts that have happened over time, I think what Google needs to realize is that experienced advertisers are now giving less and less and less chances because of all the bad experiences we've had now. Like I've had Google reps email my boss or try to. It was also me, so that was fun for them. But they like emailed the manager and it was me, and I'm like, same person who didn't want to talk to you on the phone. But they shouldn't be going around people on the account. They shouldn't be like, and so I think there's a lot of area for improvement there, but I could probably also benefit from giving them a chance more.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. And again, for me, like I get really excited when I see an email from @google.com, and I know not everyone feels that way.
Delete.
Yeah, so I love being able to hop on and chat, and I find that fun as someone who used to work there, but fully empathize that to most people, that's not like a fun way to spend a half hour.
But I might be missing out too. And I think that that's something, I think that when we talk about binary thinking, I can get also very caught in this like Google rep call bad, deleting email good mentality, because I do think, and I do know that a bunch of my like top tips and tricks have come from Google reps as recently as like a year and a half ago. So, but I don't like the like random roll of the dice. It ends up being, so I try, and which is what I recommend everyone does, is like take that first call, and then if it ends up not working out, then like go from there. But every time it's a new name, maybe give them a chance, because you don't know, you could end up with someone amazing. You mentioned auto apply recommendations.
Okay.
How do you feel?
Could I say one more thing before we go there?
Yes.
There's one thing I want to add to that. I shared this advice with the members of my Google Ads course, but I want to share it again here, is that the relationship with the Google rep is a two-way relationship. And so if there's something you want out of the relationship, something you want to know, like as someone who doesn't work at Google, you can also ask them. And so a question that I suggest that you ask to your Google rep is like, hey, can you give me some examples of ways we can work together? Like, what do your really successful relationships look like with other clients? What kind of insights do you provide to them? What kind of recommendations do you apply to them? What are some things I should expect from you? What are some things I should not expect to you? And they're like, as clients, those are things we can do to try to put our piece in to try to make that a productive relationship. So don't be afraid to ask. The worst they can say is no.
I think that's good advice. Larry also makes another good point that depending on how many accounts you manage, it can be impossible to have calls with your rep. I think that this is partially due also to how agencies set up their management systems or freelancers set up their system. If you don't have everything under one MCC, Google has no idea you're the same person working in all of those different accounts. That being said, I've had everything under one MCC and had like 6 Google reps for the quarter. So, I do think that can probably be streamlined as well. I just take the first call then, Larry, and then I ignore the other 5.
No, the rest.
The other 5 just have.
So you mentioned auto apply recommendations. I think we're going to agree on this one, but you go first.
Oh, I just don't think Google has a right to change things in people's accounts automatically without it being filtered through a person. I don't think my opinion will ever change on that. They could have the best machine learning in the world. They could understand semantics. I could be matching to terms that make sense. And I still would say, do not write ads for me. Just it's the same. I wouldn't let, like, if someone walked by in front of my house, I wouldn't be like, what do you think about, like, write an ad for me? Like, I realize we don't have the same information, but it's hard. And one of the things I tell my clients all the time is I don't have the context of your business. I have a duty of care to you to manage your ads the best way. But if you have a sale on, if you change your website, if you like you have to tell me. And also, like, if the leads are bad quality, like, you have to tell me. There's a two-way street of responsibility, much like your very good Google rep point. And Google auto applying those recommendations, A, jeopardizes my relationship with the client, but B, takes away that context that's so important from the business itself. And also they're not very good. But even if they were good, I wouldn't want them auto applied.
I agree. I'm not a fan of auto apply recommendations. If I audit an account and they have it turned on, I tell them to turn it off. And I've seen it do stuff that, because it lacks business context, like it'll add a dynamic ad group to a brand campaign, which means for those who don't know, that like I have a brand campaign set up. I only want to advertise to people searching for my brand. A dynamic ad group is going to look at all the potential keywords on my website and serve ads. And like, I don't want that. Anyone with business context would know that. But it's like, hey, every campaign should have a dynamic ad group. Let's do it. I get why it was created. I can only imagine the number of Google Ads accounts out there that someone sets up and then like never looks at it again, or looks at it and doesn't know what to do. And if the trade-off is making some changes versus not, maybe those changes will be helpful. Again, assuming conversion tracking is set up properly, then if any of those recommendations are bad, they will work themselves out. Like if a dynamic ad group goes in and doesn't perform well, then the traffic will go to zero. So it's like, in theory, these things do work well. In practice, yeah, I don't recommend AAR at all. And so the way that I've gotten around that, because I know with every Google rep I've interacted with, like they have to bring that up. I will do them a favor, which some people say I shouldn't have to, but I choose to, and I'll turn on one that has no impact on the results. So I turn on add audiences for reporting. It adds some audiences and observation. It's not going to spend more money. It's not going to have a bad impact. And that way I've at least checked the box so that my Google rep and I can move on and talk about something else. But again, that's just something I choose to do for relationship building. Doesn't hurt my client. I know some people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're even thinking of doing that, Jyll.
No, I mean, and I am thinking I would never do that. That's what I'm thinking. But I think that you also like you make a good case for doing it. And I don't think it's a terrible, and that's why like you just said, people would be like, oh, Jyll, that's the worst decision ever. And it's like, that's the stuff, that's the disagreements we need to start to avoid in the industry, because it doesn't matter if you want to do that for your accounts, who's to say that that's like wrong, right? It's a negligible impact at the end of the day. And we spend so much time arguing about these things that really don't matter, when we could be arguing about discussing the things that really do matter. You said something while you were talking, and the learning period. The learning period. And again, and this comes back to the budget levels, I think we're going to land there again.
Yeah.
Is that my clients often cannot afford to learn, to let the machine learn. We can't spend, 2 weeks or longer, depending on volume and budget and thresholds, to let the system learn. And I also understand, though, and this is something that a bunch of people in industry, Aaron Levy, Patrick Gilbert, have, and Kirk as well, actually have helped me just shift my perspective on, because 6 years ago was like, no machine learning ever. And then now I'm like, automated bidding is pretty great. And like machine learning can be helpful.
Wait, say that again.
Automated bidding is pretty great, but sometimes.
She said it,
everyone. It depends. But I have shifted my perspective. Like, I understand that's literally how machines learn, and that they do have a whole bunch of signals that we don't have available to us. But I still think the context piece is what's so important. And I can't afford, most of my clients cannot afford, literally, like money-wise, to let the machine learn. I don't know that there's an answer to that, other than like they're just at an inherent disadvantage until things get smoother. But I also wish, like Julie mentioned earlier in the chat, that there was more threshold information from Google about the different types of campaigns, and like that would really help me. Like, if you need 15 conversions to do your job, okay, I'll get the account to 15 and then I'll let you learn. But there's no real clarity around that. I think it's pretty murky. It's like pretty general. So anyways, that was like 8 points. Go ahead, Jyll.
It is. And actually, because of the size of the budgets I worked at Google, like I never thought Google had a learning period, because like when your client is spending 6 figures a day on Google ads, stuff learns real fast. Like it just wasn't. And so when I left Google and started learning about Facebook ads people talk about learning. I don't want to shift it back into learning all the time. And I was like, we don't have to deal with that. And then I started working with small business owners. And yes, we do have to deal with that. And it is such a catch-22, right? Because it's like, once a machine can learn, it can drive really great results, or it may learn that it cannot drive the results you want, right? That's another potential outcome of that, to your point. And it really is hard to get to those spend levels, especially like, again, I think that for e-commerce businesses, it's a little bit easier because it's optimizing towards true money in the bank in that moment. Lead gen's a lot harder because of the knock on and the sales team and but actually e-commerce businesses I find do tend to have a longer learning period, because with a lead, it's like, did the lead come in or not? It's a binary. Conversion happened, didn't. Whereas with ROAS bidding, on a value-based bidding, it's not just did the conversion happen or not, but was it a valuable conversion or not? And so that actually requires, I don't know if this is in my opinion or experience, in one of those two, requires even more data to be able to learn. But then the trade-off is like, we genuinely know if our ROAS is like something good or not something good. Larry says, poor B2B. Yeah, I specialized in what I call B to SMB. So working with companies at Google who are B2B companies, but the B they support is an SMB. So they're in that hybrid B2C, B2B space. But yeah, it's definitely trickier. And there have been better things like the offline conversion import tool, things that are helping along that way, but it definitely is a greater challenge. So kudos to you, Amalia, and to others who focus on B2B. Julie says here in the chat, learning periods in search ads also very different from how paid search has historically been. Expectation setting needs to change with this, even with established accounts. And actually, Julie, you spoke a bit more about this earlier this week on Twitter. I saw that, 5 to 10 years ago, it's like paid search, you turned it on and boom, like that learning thing wasn't there because so much more was just working manually. Now the periods have gotten longer, but it's also able to do much more sophisticated things for you. So it absolutely is a trade-off. It's been happening slowly, sort of like the frog sitting in the water and the heat is turning up and up and up. And all of a sudden it's like, what do you mean we have a learning period in Google Ads? Let me hop out of here. But I agree that expectation setting with clients in any scenario, but especially around this would be key.
And this is a really good segue into search query reports and the missing data, because I think that one of the reasons why we feel like the frog sitting in the water is like, I think, and I came into paid search, honestly, I had like 1.5 years of what I would call the good old days. And then I ended up like, it's just been change after change after change since. But it's really interesting because just like I grew up with like internet not being a thing, and then dial up, and then internet as we know it. So I've experienced like, this spectrum of different things. Excuse me. Wow. But with the search query report, I think before, because we had so much more insight and match types behaved the way their name suggests. Jyll, I know you know this because you teach people, but trying to teach people that exact match is not exact, and phrase match does not mean phrase, and broad match means most things under the sun. It's impossible. It's literally, I actually teach it by saying, this is very confusing. So if you're confused, don't worry, because I'm also still confused and I'm teaching it to you. So it's totally fine. We can all be confused together. But part of the reason I think it was easier before is that we had that full transparency, and we don't now. And Google's reason is quote unquote privacy, which I honestly do not 100% buy. But also, we talked about how I don't trust Google. So those two things may be highly correlated. But I think that's part of what makes it difficult for for that shift to have happened, for the lack of around that shift from Google, and then also to lose a whole bunch of our query results. Like, I don't think that if something is driving a conversion, I shouldn't be able to see it. Like, take away some other elements, but I don't believe that if my account is generating a lead, that you should be able to hide what term did that for me. And I know aggregate data and all those things I probably don't understand, but from where I sit, it's very frustrating.
I validate that frustration. Like, I'm not going to say I share it, but like totally validate. That's what I learned in therapy. It's good to validate others' emotions. So I validate, I empathize, and I don't share the same frustration, but like I fully understand why that's so frustrating for you and Julie and so many others. On this privacy point, I will say, we're like, oh yeah, Google privacy, like genuinely, as someone who worked at Google takes privacy so seriously. And I know that's really hard for us to believe on the outside, but just the amount of training, certifications, whatever it might be, the Googlers have to go through, the levels you need to go through, get access to stuff. It's like very serious. So like, is the reason that half of your search terms aren't available to you genuinely because they're privacy concern or not? I don't know. But I can say that like Google, especially now, but even still over the 6 years I was there, like privacy is the number one thing. And so often the reason that even as a Googler, you can't see this or can't do this. Is like, no, user privacy can't do that. Or it could be potentially a risk to user privacy, can't do that.
I think the big, and I mean, I'm glad they take privacy seriously. I think the big thing is trust in how they communicate with the industry sometimes, but also it was quite the swap to go, like, we could have it for so long and then all of a sudden you couldn't have it. And maybe that's the wider conversation around privacy that was happening in the industry as a whole. But I just, like I mentioned earlier, I do not know. I literally cannot think of another service, and maybe somebody else can, where you pay for something and you don't have all the information about like what has happened or what you get on the other side. Like,
other display networks do it. Like Google Display Network's not the only one. Tons of these remarketing platforms. You have no idea.
I meant like outside of the industry, because I'm sure other people do it. But I was thinking, I was like, I go to the dentist and they tell me what they're going to do. I'm kidding. Well, and then Julie makes a really good point here too, is the disconnect that blows her mind on the whole privacy reasoning is how many one impression, 0-click terms you do get to see, but you can't see converting terms. It's like, if privacy is the reason, why do we get to see that one impression term or that one click term? That would probably be more, because the impression, I think it's probably a lot harder to identify who that was, but the click to your site, it would be arguably just as easy to identify the person. So I'm with Julie on that. But I think that really does boil down to trust. I think it really does boil down to where we stand and our different experiences with Google and around Google. I have been to the Google offices in New York and it was amazing. Like, I've had great experiences with Google along the way, but I see it as my job as a duty of care to my clients. And I cannot fully perform that duty of care sometimes because of what Google is choosing to show or not show for whatever reason. And I think that more transparency and communication with even key leaders in our field would be really helpful and go a long way. And like, Ginny Marvin's doing an amazing job. And I think she's wonderful. Like, it's made such a difference to have her in that space and in that role. And I think there's probably even more that they could do from a clarity perspective. But I also take your point that it's a massive organization and one change can make a huge impact to them, and that they have shareholders to be accountable for. I just wish everyone knew that was the case. And Larry said, the more data we can see, the better we can help. And Julie said, yes, I want to help the machines understand my clients' businesses better. And I think that's what we all do want.
It's so, because to me, the thing that surprised me most when Performance Max was announced was the audience signal. And the audience signal being explained as a way for you to help the machines learn, because that runs like counter to everything I've learned and thought about automation. Like, the algorithm doesn't want your help to learn. The algorithm wants to look at tons of data and learn from data, not from what we humans are observing and biased and whatever. So I get the instinct to want to help the machines learn. I'm surprised that an audience signal works that way, but I actually don't share the desire that Larry and Julie might have, that like, oh, I want to help the machine learn. I'm like, no, the machine is going to learn and see opportunities that I wouldn't even be able to know if I can give it the leeway and if I can afford, to your great point, Amalia, to let it do that. But I think that's also, we've talked about, our different approaches, and where we come to this is like, yeah, I'm someone who believes that like Google ads can, and I've seen it drive amazing results, change lives, great profits, all this stuff. And so I see my role as just helping my clients understand how to make Google work for them. And the thing that frustrates me so much in the industry with like the clickbait and the Twitter headlines is like, here's a way to hack the system. Here's a secret Google doesn't want. Like, really? So my whole approach is based on like, I understand how Google Ads works, as we all do. I understand how Google thinks and why things work the way we do. And so I just want to help more entrepreneurs and marketers figure out, rather than feeling like it's us against Google, like, how do we use these tools to our advantage and make machine learning and automation, all these things work for us, because there's only going to be more of it in the future.
Yeah. And I have one final point before we wrap up. I think I'm in the middle ground of like wanting to help the machine learn, because I agree that the machine's job is to find things, but I also believe that you have to point it in the right direction. That's why we have clicks versus conversion types of bid strategies, etc., is like, it's like a self-driving car. It needs a destination, and it needs to understand that when the child is in front of the car, you don't keep driving. Like, you stop to let the kid cross the street, right? So I still think it does need signals from us to kind of keep it on a path to achieve a goal we want, because otherwise it's just going to run amok. I've audited accounts, as I'm sure you have, where the conversion is like a page view and it's a conversion bidding strategy, and then all it's doing is maximizing for page views, because that's all it sees, that number going higher and higher and higher, and it's like, oh, we can get more of those easily, and that's what it then optimizes for, which I do think is the fault of the marketer for not pointing it in the right direction. And I do think more data means we can do more fencing in of the chaos. But I also think you make a great point about working. I think we all have the same end goal.
Yes.
And this is something that a lot of people in this space, not the people who are here, not the people that we know, seem to forget. Is like, the end goal is to do what's best for our clients. The end goal is to continue to learn and help each other. Like, this industry was built on the back of the people who came before us, and we will continue to need new people and new ideas to go forward. And so I would love to see more discussions like this and debates like this, as opposed to that clickbait and that hack and the like comment from my 10-page guide that probably doesn't have a ton of information that you actually need. And our whole overall goal with this was, presenting different opinions without being, disagreeable. Like you said, we can disagree without being disagreeable. So, yeah, I think.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm very new to the PPC chat community and the Twitter community. And I've shared this with you privately, Amalia, that when I first started tweeting there, I was just going to stop because so many people are being like so rude and disrespectful. And I have to keep blocking. I was like, is there even a place for me here? But then there are wonderful, friendly faces like you and Julie and Larry's here as well, and others who are like, no, like, thank you for your opinion. I don't agree with you, but thank you. And that was so powerful for me and what's kept me on Twitter. And now I'm so glad I have, because we're able to do great things like this. So thank you to all who are watching live right now and watching the broadcast later. We would love to continue this conversation with you. You can use the hashtag Google Ads Debate on Twitter. Thank you, Amalia, for joining me today on YouTube. And we will have to do this again soon. It's been so much fun to get to know you through text and now through video.
It's been so much fun. Thank you for having me, for setting up all the tech, even though my computer tried to break your tech. And then, so for anybody who's looking for us, you can find me at Amalia E. Fowler on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'm trying to build a presence there. Don't expect much. And then, Jyll, where can people find you?
You can find me as Jyll Saskin Gales on Twitter, and on other social media, I'm the Google Pro. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, the Google Pro. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.